Okay, now you can see me. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the launch of the special report that we prepared as Hydrogen Europe together with REVOLVE and with many of our members. Hydrogen Europe is a European association basically trying to make hydrogen technologies used all over Europe and also to make Europe the hub of a hydrogen economy, so to propel it in order to fulfill what people discuss in Glasgow during the COP right now. So this is the broader context. The special report that we launched today will definitely give lots of ideas how we can mitigate the effects that especially CO2 has on the climate. And hydrogen is like a multi-talent. We call it Hero Net Zero because it can help many technologies to bring emissions down. But let us start with one very concrete example. It's quite emotional. So let's see what happens in the northern Netherlands in a video. You will see the video right now.
Driving a bus is a tough job. My earliest shift starts at 5 in the morning. I have to be able to take responsibility and control big vehicles. Looking back, I think I always wanted to be a bus driver. As a child, growing up in the Netherlands, my siblings and I often played bus. I was the driver. 4 years ago, I trained to be a bus driver. And it's the best decision I've made in my life. And now I'm proud to be driving something new, a hydrogen bus. I get a lot of interest, especially from the younger generation, about how it works and how it helps the environment. I've driven many kinds of buses, from double-deckers to electric ones. But I like the hydrogen bus most because it feels steady and solid when I drive it. And it only needs to be fueled once at the end of the day. And of course, with green energy. I think hydrogen is the fuel of the future.
Well, as Hydrogen Europe, we are quite proud about this short but clear statement that Jaya, this 60-year-old bus driver who learned bus driving when she was 55, that she made. And she was referring to especially the younger generation being interested in hydrogen. And that's exactly what we live in our everyday experience, that indeed it's a huge interest around hydrogen and around the possibilities to use hydrogen for the decarbonization of our economy and to create a lot of jobs. And in this launching event of our special report, we would like to elaborate more on the different possibilities to use hydrogen in different fields. And we have distinguished speakers today from our membership that can give first-class and first-hand information about how this works. We will start with Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Groups, which is, so to say, the broader context, and it's Prime Metals Technologies, which is the very concrete context. Alexander Fleischanderi, who is the head of the Eco Solutions at Prime Metals Technologies, is with us today, and he can explain why so many politicians believe in one thing, that you can decarbonize even the steel production. So you can make steel without CO2 emissions. How is this possible? Alexander, this is your everyday business. Please give us your short presentation.
Thanks a lot, Jorgo, for this kind introduction, and it's a pleasure for me participating in this launch event for Hydrogen Europe report. Well, it's if you say, Jorgo, it's our daily business on carbon-free steel. I would say it's one of the dominating burning questions over the past 12 or 18 months, and also with the Clean Deal announcement 1.5 years back. Let me refer to steel, where we are today. So steel is quite a conservative, hard to abate industry. It's still mainly based on fossil fuels, so mainly coal. 75% of all the energy that is required to produce steel is still based on coal and coke, and just the remaining 25% is based on electric power and gas. So it's one of the main contributors from the industry for the carbon emissions. On a global perspective, it's up to 10% on carbon emissions coming from the steel sector. So it's definitely one of the sectors that is facing the issue to how to decarbonize. And at the end, the only way to arrive at the target of net zero is hydrogen. What is the missing link still? And this is an initial statement, is simply the scale of hydrogen that is required to produce carbon-free steel. Just assuming or providing one ballpark figure, if we convert from the traditional way how we produce steel today via blast furnace and BOF converter, and transform this to hydrogen-based direct reduction, it requires 70,000 tons of hydrogen each year for 1 million tons of direct reduced iron. So meaning at the end we talk about 350 or 400 megawatt electrolyzer capacity. And to bring this in a global context, if we would transfer all this steel that is produced via blast furnace globally and switch to hydrogen-based technologies, it would require 500 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity or 4,000 terawatt hours of renewable power each year. So I would say we are prepared regarding the technology. We're just looking for the scale of economy regarding green hydrogen. So back to you, Jorgo. You're on mute.
That is an amazing figure, Alexander, that you just mentioned there. So 500 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity per year, or 4,000 terawatt hours. And the question is, do you believe that we can get there? And my other question is, can we get there with hydrogen produced in Europe only? Because this sounds so huge that we need to take sun-rich and wind-rich regions globally into this equation. Do you have any idea how this would work?
Yeah, I think that's a question that is not answered fully up to date, but I would agree that a massive number if we talk about the hydrogen requirement. But it could work like a combined system. Let's say there have been quite a number of announcements for direct reduction plants from the European steel industry, and also the willingness to go into hydrogen. And others might locate their hardship-based direct reduction in other regions of the world, where also the iron ore is, and where there is a vast opportunity for cheap renewable energy. Just mentioning Australia or Canada or Chile. and then to ship the direct reduced iron as a green metallics virgin material for further processing into Europe. So I think it will be a mix. First of all, we have to keep the steel industry alive in Europe. It's a backbone of the economy. It's important for our economy, for the jobs, for the education, and also for the cross-sector industry. So the steel industry is pretty much linked with cement and power. So therefore, it has to stay in Europe.
Now, to make this a little bit more concrete, because it's an interesting case. Today, we are importing as Europeans basically the iron ore from other regions in the world, from Australia, from Canada to Europe. We are doing the reduction of oxygen here, and we are then bringing this reduced virgin iron, so to say, into a special steel product. When I understand you correctly, then we would not import the iron ore to Europe, but we would bring it, let's say, to Morocco or Mauritania, so to places that are easily accessible via sea, but they have much more possibilities and access to sun. So we could do the iron ore, the direct reduction of iron ore there, and then continue the journey with the reduced, so to say, iron, and do the special steel in Europe. Is that what you have in mind?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say just going one step further in the value chain for the mining companies, and we are talking quite intensively with all the major mining companies, and they have a strategy to go into direct reduction. As you just mentioned, this could work in Mauritania, that they have quite high quality iron ore. There are a lot of sun and wind. Australia as well, and the others that we talked. But not only. So we will see also direct reduction plants in Europe. So we will require hydrogen in Europe as well. So both plans will be executed.
But basically, Alexander, this is good news for the COP26, because the COP is a global decision-making process, and normally it is the countries of the global south or the countries under development that have issues here. In this example that you just mentioned, or that we just discussed here, they would benefit. Everybody benefits, because altogether we have the reduction of CO2. So we have a clear CO2 abatement, and you mentioned also the figures, but we see a clear possibility to create value, jobs and value, added value in Mauritania, which was not the case right now. Is that a correct understanding? It's a win-win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what is the added value. I would say, if we really look into this global perspective, and it would also avoid the discussion that we are facing actually on carbon border adjustment mechanism and leakage of carbon. So because if we produce green pre-metallics in Africa and Australia and ship it into Europe, there wouldn't be an issue of any carbon leakage, right? So I think finally that's going to happen. Simply also driven and maybe coming back a bit on the rule book set up also by the European Commission on the Green Deal. Well, they have the plan is actually to reduce the free allocations of the ETS scheme for the steel industry, starting from the year 26, and then year by year less free allocations to the steel industry until 2035, right? and starting from 35, they will have to buy all the certificates on the ETS market. Just assuming, providing another ballpark figure. So in average in Europe, the free allocation to the industry is around 80%. So if you have a typical steel mill with 6 million tons actually, and emitting 1.8 ton of CO2 per ton of steel, which is also quite an average figure for an integrated mill. Today, they have to pay around 130 million euro for ETS certificates. If we do the same calculation for the year of 35, and they will see no free allocation, and assuming that the ETS price goes up to 90 euro per ton from actually a level of 60, it would be quite close to 1 billion euro payment for ETS certificates. So I think that's one of the core drivers for the steel sector in Europe to think intensively, and all of them have thought quite well and defined their strategies on the way out of gray steel, and how they come to green steel finally. And just saying, well, as we are many of us at the COP26 actually, 137 countries have agreed to net zero actually, and these 137 countries reflect almost 80% of the global steel production. And also the 5 leading steel companies, so the biggest shots on the market are committed and have set their targets in the way out how they arrive at net carbon steel. So I think the strategies are set. We are still right at the beginning, but just looking back to the last COP meeting, I would say many things have really changed. It's much more clear the way to go, the strategies for the company. So now we have just to move ahead and to scale the economy, mainly for the hydrogen.
Thank you. I myself, I also remember the last COPs. I started to talk about hydrogen in Bonn. And to be honest, Alexander, it was more difficult back then because hydrogen was not an issue. Hydrogen was still quite a niche technology. And it seems that, especially also due to your activities in the steel world, it is so attractive and it's so clearly to understand that hydrogen has become something like a political commodity already. Now it needs to become a commodity in global commerce. And thanks very much. And maybe I have one last question. I know you need to leave and you are in Glasgow, and that's why you are under pressure. Do you believe that the CBAM mechanism will work? Because you described very well and very drastically how basically the ETS price will make this business very, very difficult. But could CBAM, so the carbon border adjustment mechanism, could that help to mitigate this burden? And we have seen the first drafts of how this then would work. But is it a good solution out of your perspective?
Well, it's a quite sensitive question. So I'm representing engineering plant building in the steel sector and not steel producing industry, but steel producers. But basically, I think it's a good instrument. On the one hand, to avoid carbon leakage, let's say from just to name a couple of countries, Russia, Ukraine, but also India and whoever. To penetrate gray steel into Europe at a very competitive price, let's say, And it's clear, green steel comes with a premium price. Yeah? And therefore, this CBAM is one instrument that could help avoiding that carbon leakage and to balance, putting also a burden on the other countries that are going to import steel into Europe, and to balance that burden that comes with the green steel. On the other hand, it does not solve the other way around. If Europe is going to export steel into neighboring countries or any country in the world, and it comes with a premium price, there's no mechanism to balance that one. So I think finally it's one of the core requirements to establish a green steel market, and I see this also as a major role of the governments, of the politics, actually, because they can lead this establishment of a green steel market, because there's a large quantity of steel purchased from the public hand. So if we just talk about infrastructure, rails, whatever, so they could simply define in a clear rule book that for any of these purposes, only green steel with a certain carbon footprint is allowed to be purchased, and then definitely there would quickly establish a green steel market which comes with a premium price. I think that's one of the missing links still in the market, but I think when we talk in a year or two, this green steel market will have been established as well.
Many thanks, Alexander. Many thanks for also giving us detailed information of how this could work. It's all part of this special report that we are launching today. So thanks also for your contribution, the special report where this is explained also in written and by some graphs. This is open for the public. I would then let you go to the negotiations at the COP26 in Glasgow, dear Alexander, and would like to thank you very much, and would now turn to the next speaker. Thank you, Alexander. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jorgo. Thanks, everyone.
Danke. We turn to the guys who are making the technology basically to let hydrogen be produced. And this technology is called electrolyzers. That's the attractive thing. That's the hot shit in town. I would say everybody talks about electrolyzers. And well, one of the best known companies in the world is Nel. Nel from Norway and Denmark, but they started in Norway. And we have here with us from Nel, of course, Thorsten Herbert, who is the Director Market Development and Public Affairs at Nel. Thorsten, I know that you are in Norway. I mean, you are basically from Germany. You moved to Norway to really support this development of Nel being one of the global leaders, and you are already in that technology. My question is, if you just listen to the conversation we had and this fantastic figure of 500 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity per year. So that's business for you, Thorsten. I remember very well, you contributed excellently to the 40 gigawatt strategy that is now enshrined in the European hydrogen strategy more than a year ago, 1.5 years ago. Where are we on this journey to ramp up electrolyzer capacity on a global scale? Thorsten Herbert, welcome to this launch event. And please, you have the floor.
Yeah, Jorgo, thanks a lot for the enthusiastic introduction of the topic of electrolyzers. I think that's also needed as we experience it then, because like what we experience currently also working in Brussels, that like the awareness on like the heart of the whole thing is the electrolysis is not really, let's say, like politicians aren't aware that this is the core technology that we also make sure that this core technology is produced in Europe, and could also become like an export hit. Yeah, you called it the hot shit in town. So yeah, that's why we're working to. That's our goal. And where are we? Maybe some first 2 words to Nel. So Nel is in fact a pure play hydrogen technology company. We're located, as you mentioned earlier, we're located in Norway, in Denmark, where we're actually producing hydrogen refueling stations. So we're also having stakes in, let's say, these nice stories about fuel cell buses and their refueling. And we also have a manufacturing facility for PEM electrolysis in the US, actually. Yeah, and if it comes to these 400 or 500 gigawatts, that's in fact another dimension. Nevertheless, Nel is in fact preparing for that. And we have, as we speak, real 550 megawatt per year production capacity, which, if you look at the targets, maybe not the 40 gigawatt, but the 6 gigawatt in a few years, this is already a quite significant contribution. And if you take into account that this market isn't already running smoothly, this is a huge step Nel is taking here, or has been performing. The upfront investment is huge, actually, to just prepare for a market that we all work for will hopefully come. And yeah, the big achievement here is really that we have these 550 megawatt as we speak. It's 50 megawatt PEM electrolysis in the US. And in fact, and that's the highlight currently within the company and also in the electrolysis world, that we are just entering, or we just entered test manufacturing in our new facility in Herøya in Norway, where we talk about 500 megawatt alkaline electrolysis per year. A fully automated production line. So that's the world's first fully automated production line for electrolyzers. And just with this measure, implementing this first line of 500 megawatts per year, we are already in the range of a 40 to 50% capex reduction for, let's say, the existing Nel technology with this scaling step. And let's say, what is the road ahead? So with this line, this fully automated line, just running as we speak, we will be able to duplicate that, or to replicate that. And also the location in Norway gives us space for adding another 3 of those lines. So the building that we are locating that gives us actually space for 2 gigawatt alkaline electrolysis production capacity per year, which then also becomes already a significant contribution to the 40 gigawatt target. But yeah, obviously, if we talk about these 400 to 500 gigawatt, we need, let's say, some more steps. But I think with this first, let's say, fully automated line, we actually prepared. We know what to do. We can replicate that in the building in Herøya or anywhere else in Europe.
That's what I would like to discuss with you, because you were talking about the costs, of course, that via ramping up will go down. I always hear the criticism that hydrogen is something like the champagne of the energy world, which is, of course, true, because at the moment it's a scarce technology. but once you ramp it up, it becomes Prosecco, which I, by the way, prefer, and then it becomes table water from pricing, and that's I think what we are going to see. But I would like to discuss with you. You said you can replicate it, or you can ramp up factories, manufacturing of electrolyzers anywhere in the world. I mean, let's start first with Europe. And let me ask you, why don't you do that? What's the bottleneck for you to produce electrolyzers in Spain, where, by the way, you might get in the post-corona funding some money, some funding from affected regions. I know a region which is very affected in Spain, that's Asturias, a lot of steel production, and they need a lot of electrolysis. They have sun. They could even do it without importing too much of hydrogen, so they would need the electrolysis at the spot in Asturias. Is that possible, that you get state aid for the manufacturing of electrolyzer factories or electrolyzers in Asturias? Or what's the point there, and what's the bottleneck?
Like first of all, like before we come to like this concrete question of like in how far this is categorized in, like, for example, state aid guidelines, I think it's obvious. I just stated the numbers. So we are at the moment, as we speak, this 500 megawatt per year exists. It's not an announcement. It's not a brownfield. The line is running as we speak. And
congratulations,
already,
by the way. Huh? So that's good news. Congratulations, and that's important, I think, for the participants here in that launch event to understand it's not science fiction. We are talking about real stuff, a real technology. Yeah.
And that's now, like when we come from 40 megawatt in Norway in the facility, and we are now at 500. And that's already a huge step if you look at, let's say, really the implementation of the large scale projects, right? So yes, we have a lot of announcement with regards to these large scale projects, but we currently don't see it in our order books, right? And I think that's kind of the trigger we need first, also from the market, that we see, okay, now these orders come in, and now it's a good time to ramp up. And just to give you also a feeling like how fast we can be there. So with the experience from the line in Norway now, if we like stay in Norway, just like put the second line next to the existing, we are talking about maybe a bit more than a year before this could be up and running. And then you can add some time, of course, if you go to another country. But that is like, we're like, with this experience now, with the line that is already operating, we can like react quite dynamically, I would say. So this is the first, like the market trigger. And then, of course, it's, if this market trigger doesn't exist yet, we need some support, and this has been like hard in the last, especially in the last years, because like everything according to the state aid guidelines and the block exemption rules in the European Union, it doesn't include these kinds of activities, right? So we always needed like to develop large-scale production processes, and also to invest in pilot manufacturing lines. We always had to, let's say, fit that into this like tight corset of like these state aid guidelines, which means we had to fit it into like R&D activities and these kinds of things, which always also limited, let's say, really the space we had there to do these investments. And I think that would be like, in fact, an important thing. And as we know, like as of I think Hydrogen Europe just sent around an email on the block exemption proposal, for the block exemption rules proposal, and this line item, this bullet point, isn't in there, right? So it's like a lot of good news for hydrogen, because like there are lots of things in there when it comes to large-scale hydrogen production. Good news for prime metals, but yeah, really a massive factor of, let's say, the levelized cost of the renewable hydrogen in the end is the capex for the electrolyzer, and this the main lever here to decrease that is scaling up production, and this could really be, let's say, kind of an easy tool for the Commission to get this renewable hydrogen cost down, with helping the electrolyzer manufacturers scaling up production. Yeah, that would definitely be an important point.
I got it. Now, one thing is state aid. Another thing is investment impacts and investment incentives. And here we are waiting in Brussels for the so-called delegated act. I don't want to make it very complicated, but the very fact whether we can use the power grid to take some electricity to produce hydrogen in your electrolyzers is not solved yet. We are waiting for a legal idea how this can be done. Mind you, we have a lot of curtailment. We have a lot of renewable energy that cannot be absorbed by the power grid. And at the same time, would it be possible to use power grid electricity to feed your electrolyzers to produce hydrogen? Or are there any bottlenecks for investors at the moment that you see out of the electrolyzer perspective?
Yeah, of course, and it comes down to I am having some constructions going on above my head. Sorry for that. Yeah, it actually comes down to the delegated act you were talking to. I think you were referring to, let's say, the additionality question and how it is taking care of that there is sufficient renewable energy resources to produce renewable hydrogen, right? And this is actually a roadblock here at the moment, that there is no clear rules on that, and even worse, if you look at we at the moment transport like 3 points, which is that, as I said, we need this market trigger, so we need the market to start now, and that's why we are like really voting here for a phase-in of these obligations for additional renewable energy. So a phase-in, like for example, from 2025 would be great to give us, let's say, the opportunity to now start building larger electrolyzer plants. And in fact, we could exactly use like the combination of this and the argument you just teased with the curtailed energy, I think is, from our point of view, a perfect, let's say, a way to bridge this gap until the phase-in starts, because we are providing important grid services here. And yeah, as you said, we are talking about more than $1 billion in the meanwhile that is spent in Germany for, let's say, remunerating renewable energy plant operators for, let's say, curtailed energy. And we are approaching that number in Great Britain too, for example. Yeah, this could be, let's say, a perfect combination of arguments. Say electrolyzer manufacturers need orders. That means we need, let's say, a market trigger. That's why we should talk about phasing in these additionality requirements. and at the same time utilize this curtailed energy and find, and of course, but like this also needs clear rules and definitions in the meantime. And I think that's what we need to work on in the next weeks and months. And then there's a third point, that currently the burden of proving this additionality for some like weird reason lies in the hands of, let's say, our customers, like the electrolyzer operator. Like Prime Metals, for example, currently would need to prove that there is somewhere additional renewable energy providing for their green steel production, right?
Yeah.
And this also like doesn't make sense from our point of view and needs a solution. Yeah, but this is one key also when we talk about this market trigger I just mentioned.
Yeah, I really understand exactly what you say, because we all fully support the idea of additionality. I mean, nobody in our membership is against additional renewable energy resources, and that's of course the precondition of scaling up also electrolyzers. There are some countries that could use other clean technologies, like France and Finland, but that's the main source, so nobody's against it. But to prove it every 15 minutes, so Prime Metals would need to prove every 15 minutes that the energy they take from the grid is renewable. That's not, how to say, it doesn't seem a rational approach. It rather seems, and sometimes I have the impression, I'm very clear and honest to you now, Thorsten, that this is basically trying to destroy the hydrogen story. And we don't need that. We are not destroying anybody else. Well, fossils, yes, we are against the fossils, but we need electricity. We are partners of the electricity here. And that is why we sometimes don't understand. So thanks very much for this insightful understanding of how important regulation, but also state aid for a transition period is. And I would now like to turn to mobility, because we can use hydrogen in steel production. We know now how hydrogen is produced, thanks to you, Thorsten. I would now like to turn to Nicolas Erb, who represents Alstom, one of the big European producers of trains, of railway applications. And we saw in the beginning, Nicolas, the interesting and moving movie about buses. And buses are one application that I personally can understand, because battery buses might also be a solution, but maybe not on long distances. Now, in trains, I was told there is a lot of use of electric energy via the catenary. Why do we need hydrogen trains then? Isn't there enough catenary in Europe? And what's your offer here? Nicolas Erb represents Alstom. You have the floor, Nicolas.
Many thanks, Jorgo, and many thanks for the opportunity to participate to a discussion. Yes, indeed, you are fully right. Rail is already, let's say, the greenest land transport mode by far, because of this use of electricity through overhead catenary lines, which is a very established technology, very, very old, very mature. I think the first lines were probably built about a century ago. So indeed, it means that this has helped, for example, the development of very high-speed operation across Europe and elsewhere. But of course, now we have a lot of experience with this technology, and we also see very concretely the limitation, namely the fact that if on a given line the service you want to provide does not require the extra power of let's say overhead electrification, then the economic equation is challenging, because of course it's quite costly to deploy electrification along the line and the substation and to maintain that over the years. So we have seen that today still, if you look at the data on railway lines in Europe, about half of the network today is not electrified. And this includes, for example, regional lines where there are not so many trains, let's say, circulating. Last mile operations, so all the freight operation in ports or industrial areas. And due to the fact that you have these areas of unelectrified network, you also still have quite a significant part of freight operation which are relying on diesel power. So here what we try to do as Alstom was to see, okay, what is the alternative we can propose? Because even if in a way we are the best-in-class transport mode, we also need to do our homework and to be able to contribute to the climate neutrality objective of Europe and of the rest of the world. And this is where hydrogen comes in, because we believe that this is one of the best options to indeed provide an alternative to diesel propulsion on this part of the network that are not electrified today, and that will not be electrified anyway because again the costs are unreasonable. So this is really what we see as a future for fuel cell propulsion in rail operation. So basically, being one of the prime option to get rid of diesel.
I love to hear we are best in class, and it's true. Train applications are already on a very, very high level, and it's interesting to see that even here you can at spots where catenary is difficult, you can really replace diesel, which is highly used, unfortunately still highly used also in trains. So that sounds very, very good. Now, Nicolas, you have had already first not experience, but real life implementation and application of this technology. Can you explain a little bit how this went, how long you did this? I also know that the so-called homologization, so the standardization of these processes in the rail business takes some time. So can you describe in the timeline? So what did you pass through this homologization process? What did you test? And how full are your order books now?
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, it's the issue is not only about fuel cell; it's also about the railway environment. And as you said, Jorgo, one of the difficulties that for this network, which are not electrified, usually you have to comply with technical standards which are national. So a train that you develop for country A might not necessarily be, let's say, relevant for country B or C. Nevertheless, indeed, we started some years ago with our Eilint train in Germany, and we did put 2 trains in commercial operations, so real operation with passengers using the train and so on a daily basis for 2 years. And that was extremely successful. That went very, very well. To be honest, we also, for us, indeed, the added value was to go to zero emission. The customer feedback was very positive, but also regarding the lack of the reduction of noise and vibration compared to diesel. So these were some more, let's say, comfort issues that we necessarily did not put at the start on the top of our priority list, but which were very much appreciated. So that went well. These same trains have been tested in other countries where it has been possible. So Austria, for example, the Netherlands, Sweden, more recently. So this has really proven the suitability of the technology for operation in the railway environment. Now, altogether, we have some contracts in Germany, France, and Italy. So we are talking about 60 trains altogether, of different types, again because of this issue of national standards, which are not always identical. But nevertheless, it's a good start, and we see that the technology is attracting interest of other actors. So we see a momentum building up. But you have to bear with us, let's say, for some time, because the project cycles in the industry are such that when we get an order, we deliver normally 3-4 years afterwards. So that means you see a little bit of perhaps you are wondering what's happening since our first 2 trains, let's say, entered into operation. But this is perfectly normal, and the first fleet will enter into commercial service next year in Germany.
Nicolas, we have seen this noise issue also with buses. So for quite some time, the inner circle in London was served by buses and also by a hydrogen bus. And we've seen in our little movie in the beginning the example of one hydrogen bus. And indeed, especially elderly people waited. They are in pension, so they have time. They waited the diesel bus to pass, and they waited for the next because they knew it's the fuel cell bus because of the noise, because they can talk to each other when they use the bus together. And obviously there is a similar aspect in trains, which is fantastic to know. Now, what are the next bigger steps? So what is your expectation? Will we see lots of, I mean, you mentioned some countries, Netherlands, and I have to say the usual suspects. So Netherlands, Austria, Germany, or also France. But is your expectation that this will be also a success on a global level? Do you see also interest for your product for the island train in other regions of the world? And what can we expect there? I mean, I'm a proud European, and I'm always proud, to be honest, to see that European technology kicks off, and you were the first in the world. Huh? I mean, Alstom, and we have to say, Nicolas, I say this as somebody who knows Germany very well. It was basically French engineering in Germany, so it was a French-German corporation. So I'm very proud. But how is the rest of the world picking up on it? So will we sell a lot of islands around the globe?
Well, we certainly hope so. No, we do see that the technology has attracted a lot of interest. We've seen some of our competitors in Asia, for example, announcing developments as well, or investment in the fuel cell technology. There's one project also in the United States, so for one prototype train. So there is definitely the fact that we have showed that this was possible has kind of really focused the attention of the sector. Again, we are only at the very beginning. When I said we have in our order books about 60 trains, you have to think that in Europe today you have approximately 6,000 diesel trains in operation and the same number of diesel locomotives. So the problem to solve, so to speak, in terms of diesel propulsion is quite big still. The majority is still in front of us. So I think here what we need to scale up is really have a bit more perhaps focus as well on this part of the network. Because one of the difficulty we face is in the industry, I referred to a life cycle. If someone buys a diesel train today, it will still be in operation in 2050 and probably beyond. So that means that if you want to ensure that by 2050 you have, let's say, a complete zero emission train system in Europe or elsewhere, you need to focus on it now, because you need to invest sooner rather than later to achieve this objective. And what we see as the critical issues is indeed this sort of scaling up. So going for big projects, because you both have, let's say, the fixed cost related more to a fuel cell and to the fact that you need to develop a portfolio of solutions to address all the national needs. The availability of hydrogen is still unfortunately an issue. So we need as well some improvement in that respect, because clearly the availability and the cost of hydrogen is one of the main drivers for the global competitiveness of fuel cell vehicles. So these are really the two challenges that we see ahead of us to unlock the full potential of this technology in the railway environment.
Many thanks. When it comes to availability of hydrogen, we would have loved also to involve one of the, I would say, traditional producers of hydrogen, Linde. And we had in our list here today of participants also David Burns, who is the Vice President Clean Hydrogen at Linde. But due to technical issues, we could not really bring him into the show. So Obviously, I took a little bit longer time to discuss with you, Nicolas, and also with Thorsten. And if you allow, I would now come to a final question, but to both of you, and to Nicolas and to Thorsten. We discussed different technologies. We discussed also that that was very interesting in the very beginning, that possibly some production schemes will go out of Europe, like the reduction of iron ore, in order to save the speciality of steel, the special steels in Europe, so to save jobs. So that it might make sense. So there will be shifts and changes around different countries around the globe. That's my question, my final question, because this is with regards to COP. Who will be the winners of this hydrogen development? Do you see some countries, some geographies that we can already qualify as, wow, they have huge potential and they have taken the right decision, the right political decision to seek for that potential? Others might have potential and they are still sleeping. So I would start with you, Nicolas. Do you see, because you are a global company, do you see any hot candidates to become the hydrogen giants of the future?
It's a difficult question you're asking there, Jorgo.
Of course, France, Nicolas. Of course, France.
No, but in the case of railway, I think we can mention definitely the three countries that have indeed invested into, let's say, real fleets for real operation in the years to come. So that would be Germany, Italy, and France. So these are the three countries in which you will see a fleet of hydrogen trains in service in the years to come. So entire fleets, not just a single prototype or a couple of prototypes. Then again, we see a lot of interest in all geographies. It's more a question of I would say the ability as well to structure projects, because you need to involve indeed hydrogen producers. You need to involve, let's say, more of the logistic part of things to secure the supply of hydrogen at the right place in the right quantity. And indeed, you also need, on our end, let's say, to have an alignment of the public transport authorities and operators to go in that direction. So even if it's perhaps easier for rail than for other modes of transport, you still have a number of stakeholders that need to be aligned to unlock this type of projects. So we have succeeded in 3 countries already, and we look forward to more projects elsewhere in the world. But yeah, I mean, it's perhaps a bit early to start naming winners and losers. I think let's wait a bit more before we go that far.
Well, we have heard quite some time now that state leaders, government leaders want to be number one in hydrogen. I've heard it in France, in Germany, in the Netherlands. So it's indeed the usual suspect. But I have to admit that Emmanuel Macron, the president of the French Republic, has quite recently announced huge plans, including hydrogen. So 30 billion euro plan where hydrogen plays a big part, a big chunk of it, not only renewably produced, as we know, also based on nuclear, but both are using then electrolyzers to make hydrogen out of it. So that brings me to Thorsten. You were smiling when you heard these.
What I can say, I'm smiling because what I can say for sure, that it at least in the short term it will not be Norway, because that's what we are experiencing currently. That definitely they are lacking ambition, especially in, let's say, the green hydrogen field. Despite the fact that the prerequisites are great, right? So there are comparably cheap renewable sources. There is the world's largest electrolyzer manufacturer in the country, and still, let's say, I can say for sure, in short term, it will not be Norway. Hopefully, they will catch up at one point. I would actually say, without talking about countries, it's on the one hand cheap renewable energy resources, And on the other hand, let's say technology, but also financial resources. And I think with the last two, we're very well positioned in Europe. So yeah, just like having Nicolas and me here, like world's largest electrolyzer manufacturer, I don't know, one of the world's largest train manufacturers, shows, right, the technology is in Europe and will come from Europe. And I think this is a big asset, and yeah, a big strength, including, let's say, also the quite strong financial resources. If we look at the recovery and resilience funds, which will especially help the southern European countries, which in addition have the cheap renewable energy resources. So this is really like very interesting for, let's say, southern European countries, which benefit a lot from the recovery and resilience funds in combination with cheap renewable sources. I think that can be front runners in Europe in the future.
Well, I have the honor, privilege, sometimes burden to have two nationalities. So the German and the Greek one. So that's cool. Huh? So the Germans would then produce, or the Northern Europeans would produce these electrolyzers that would then be installed with the money that the Mediterranean countries, the southern countries have now with this post-corona funding in proximity to renewable energy sources. And then, well, it's another win-win situation, win-win-win situation, I would say. I think that's a good perspective. Thanks to both of you. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Also, it was a pleasure to talk to Alexander and, well, to get some better understanding of how this all is, first of all, interrelated, and secondly, complex, and thirdly, it will lead to a success if we take advantage of the good framework that we basically have here in Europe and create the hydrogen economy, becoming the hub of the hydrogen economy. If you want to see more and learn more about that, please have a look at the special report where you find more information also about the two companies that have just been presented, also about Linde, of course, and about many, many others. It's interesting, it's entertaining, and you get a lot of information, so it's infotainment at its best. We would thank REVOLVE for the very, very good cooperation in not only bringing this special magazines, this special report together, but also in running this announcement, this public launching event here. You will find the link in 5 minutes, in 7 minutes on the LinkedIn page that is running also this here. So please be patient another 7 minutes and then go download it. We also will, of course, have a printed version. And that's all for today. Thanks very much to all of you listening to us. Thanks to my colleagues here to discuss, to disclose some wonderful news out of the hydrogen world. And well, let's hope that COP26 will come up with good results, with another good result. Some first have been released already and will form the basis for less CO2 and more hydrogen. Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.